Don't be discouraged. I am a multiracial Vietnamese and Irish woman in my 30s. I have long dark hair. I'm wearing a teal vest because even though it was sunny today, it's cold now. Um, and yeah, I feel really grateful to be in this space. There's many people on the call that I've learned deeply about risk and solidarity and courage from. And I'm going to channel some of the things that have been with me as I've made decisions about my own actions and encountered my own places of courage and cowardice, um, and done my own thinking about taking risks over time. And I would also invite folks to, as has been woven throughout this call, take anything that's helpful to you and leave anything that isn't. I don't know you, I don't know your congregation, so take what's helpful and leave the rest. Um, I would invite folks to think of a time when either you yourself or your spiritual community, your congregation maybe, took a risk that was in alignment with your values that was right to take. So maybe just take a moment. It could be a big or little risk. Um, it could be making a phone call, going to a protest, having a conversation, signing a public letter. It could be hiring someone or taking a stand or putting something on a sign. Think of something that felt like a risk in alignment with your values that felt right to take. And then just think about how you felt before you took the risk. Maybe sure and certain, maybe doubting, maybe scared, maybe running through all kinds of scenarios, which I know is not a feeling, but is something I do before I take a risk. Maybe numb, maybe curious, maybe amped and energized. And then think about how you felt after. Maybe relieved, maybe proud, maybe more scared and nervous, maybe in touch with the sacred, maybe powerful. And then think a little bit about what allowed you or your community to take the risk you took. The conversations, maybe the resources or support, maybe the push, maybe agitation, maybe thinking of ancestors or the future ones. And if you want to share any insights in chat, feel free to, but you don't need to. Um, we all have wisdom within us about how we take risks, about how we discern what is right and in alignment with our values as Unitarian Universalists, and as people of faith. And that wisdom can be useful to us now, even as we are in a moment where we don't have information about the future that we might wish we had. Information from the past is still useful, even if we know that it cannot guarantee the future. I'll share, I often think about the time that I participated in civil disobedience after the murder of Michael Brown by police, and was arrested after consensually participating in civil disobedience. And after we were arrested, they started to take us from our cell one by one and swab our mouths for our DNA. And that was part of the process that I had not mentally prepared for. And I, like many others, said, do you have a warrant for my DNA? I don't consent to having my DNA taken. And the U.S. Marshal said, well, you can wait in a cell to see a judge, and say that to the judge. And I don't know how long you'll wait there. Could be days. Who knows? And I realized that there were things that I knew about my own understanding of risk and courage, and other things that I didn't know that I was learning in real time. Um, a lot of the work that I do right now is about navigating risks and the need for solidarity. And I'm not going to share a lot of details in this public space, but I want to say that solidarity is deeply needed right now, and it does include risk. I've heard the Reverend Isaac Munther, who serves the Lutheran congregation in Bethlehem, talk about costly solidarity, and that is very real. I think about maybe you've seen that little image that's like comfort in, dump out when someone is grieving. Comfort the person who's grieving. If you need to vent, you dump that out. You don't share that with the person who's grieving. I think we are in a moment when we need to solidarity and risk in for people who are most being targeted. And nothing is without risk. I spoke to a Unitarian Universalist who had taken significant risks in their justice work, who said to me, "Do you know why I take risks?" They said, "I take risks because I'm an elder and I've lived a long and good life and I'm no longer a caretaker. And so I can take risks and I choose to take those." I'm not going to name all of the risks that people are taking right now, but I'm going to say some of them out loud because, as I think Nicole said, when we face things, then we can move through them together and we can change them rather than being scary clouds in the background. So right now, in alignment with our values, people have been facing and are facing everything from losing your job to worrying about losing your job to arrest, civil lawsuit, doxing and smear campaigns, congressional investigations, detention, deportation, physical violence from the state and vigilantes, and many, many other things. And I would invite us to consider our resiliency as we think about the risks we can take, to think about our own emotional, logistical, financial, legal resiliency in our own minds and also in comparison with those who are most being targeted right now. And to actually think about, like, where is my emotional resiliency these days in my own mind, and also in comparison to those who are most experiencing the violence of the state. Where is my financial resiliency right now in my own mind and in comparison to those who are most being targeted by the state? I encourage all of us to do risk mitigation. There's a lot of good guides out there about that. But one thing anyone can do is Google yourself. See what you find. Is that information you want to be public? If it's not, there's things you can do to change that. In my world, we often talk about knowing your fight. That, of course, we want to know our rights, but those rights are not being respected. And so we need to know our fight. And we need to know what we're up against and act from a place of knowledge, commitment, and vision. Again, history is one good source of information. If you have been doxxed before, that's important information. If you've been stopped at a border crossing before, if you've been profiled by the police before, if none of those things have ever happened to you, that's also helpful information about how much of a target you are and what solidarity you might be able to solidarity in for those who really, really need it right now. We are in a lineage of people who've encountered impossible times that they never should have had to live through and survive. Whether that was the Great Depression, McCarthyism, Jim Crow, colonialism, slavery, we are in a lineage of people who have said, "I will find a way to stay human, to be a human as you are a human to me." And I want to lift up one of those people from our roots. I want to lift up the Reverend Albert Dorlando, who served the Unitarian Universalist Church in New Orleans in the 1960s. Some of you may know a little bit about him. I don't know a lot about him, but I know that his congregation set up a freedom fund to provide legal assistance to those who fought for desegregation. I know that he encouraged his church's youth group to participate in sit-ins, and that 2 people arrested and charged at those sit-ins were found guilty of criminal mischief and sentenced to 10 years in prison, and that through his leadership, the church raised money to appeal the case to the Supreme Court. I know that he was ordered to testify before the House Un-American Activities Committee, that his home was firebombed, and that the front of his church was destroyed by dynamite. I don't know a lot more about Reverend Orlando, but I know that he took risks in alignment with his values. And I was recently texting a longtime UU layperson and comrade after they had spent all day at the ICE office posting an immigration bond to get someone out of ICE prison. And they were driving to give someone else their property that ICE hadn't given them. And then they were going to pick someone else up who was getting released from ICE. And I texted this person, I said, "You're a saint." And they said, ever wise, "No, I'm alive." And we, if we are on this call, are alive. And with our ancestors at our back, I hope we can all be who we are meant to be as Unitarian Universalists who are alive in this time as people of faith. You are God.